What do you think the likelihood is that mass protests get organized and those protests remain peaceful? I got to be honest. I actually think it's kind of high because I've seen the women's march where they had all the, the pussy hats or whatever. YouTube's probably going to yell at me for saying that word, but that's what they call them. Sure. And it's peaceful. It's like, old ladies marching around, waving little flags. And the protest was actually so big. I think this was back in, 2017 or 2018? It was so big that they were going to be marching around D.C., but they actually formed one giant wheel of people. No one knew where the front was anymore because there wasn't a front. But here's what we have now. And I'm actually kind of worried about it. ProtectTheResults.com. 17 days, 8 hours, 51 minutes until Election Day. At least the time of recording this. So now you know what time I recorded this if you can figure out the math. Organizing to protect the results of the 2020 election. We are building a coalition of voters ready to mobilize if Donald Trump refuses to accept the results of the 2020 presidential election. I have a question for you guys. I have a question I want you to answer in the comments. And also you can answer on Twitter if you watch this soon enough. Here's a story from the Daily Caller. Nearly a quarter of college students say they'll likely protest if Trump wins 2020 election. Survey finds. What do we get? If Trump loses, they'll protest. If it's contested, they'll protest. If he wins, they'll protest. I asked this question on Twitter. Let me refresh as I am just now recording. If the election results are contested, but leaning toward a Biden victory, should Trump concede for the sake of preventing unrest or conflict? As of right now, with 32,496 votes, yes has 13.9, no 68.6, and unsure 17.5, with the redheaded libertarian at the top response. Hell no, that would set terrible precedent. Take that S right to SCOTUS. Maddie Grigg says, I voted no, but even if the question had said Biden instead of Trump, I would still say they should investigate more, especially with all of the fraud. I would need to see more details if this happens, of course. Now, the challenge here with making this poll was look, I could have framed it as if candidate A, if candidate B, so I didn't say Trump. But the real question I wanted to ask was, will people who support Trump and right-leaning individuals, more moderate individuals, and people who follow me, do they want to see Trump fight back and try and win? The answer is overwhelmingly yes, even if it means unrest or conflict. Or I should say, if it could result in. Now, some have asked, what does it mean it's leaning toward Biden? What I mean is, let's say that Joe Biden wins 271 electoral votes and Donald Trump wins, 260 something. But there are votes up in the air in certain precincts and districts that are being contested. Trump is looking like he's not going to win, so he fights and challenges. Let's say that Donald Trump then gets the court to overturn and disqualify some ballots that came in unmarked or without envelopes, and that drops Biden down, putting Trump above 270, and then Trump wins. This could potentially lead to conflict and crisis. So the reality is, I asked this because a lot of people think that conservatives won't do anything. We know the left is going to protest. They say it right here. They're organizing these mass protests. Where's the conservative site? Imagine this. ProtectTheResults.com, another version that said, organizing to protect the results of the 2020 election. We are building a coalition of voters ready to mobilize if Joe Biden refuses to accept the results of the 2020 presidential election. Where's that? Where's the website that says we are organizing a protest in the event the election is contested and we demand the courts intervene? Where's that? All they're saying is they expect Trump to contest this and they will protest if he tries. What if the results are Trump 271 and Biden like 260 something, and then Biden files a lawsuit? Trump is the winner, barely, and Joe Biden says, no, I refuse to accept this because Hillary Clinton said Joe should not concede under any circumstances. Where's the organized protest in the event that Joe Biden refuses to concede? You see how the system is set up? Look, the right doesn't organize properly. That's a fact. And that's why Antifa has been out for a long time. And it is an advantage in some capacities because the Proud Boys are probably like the best organizing the right ever had. And they don't really do much and they kind of cause trouble. At least the media smears them enough to cause enough trouble for the right. But the right doesn't organize events like this. I take that back. I'm sorry, not the Proud Boys. Brandon Strzok and walkaway is the best organizing the right has ever seen. Maybe not ever, but it's really good. Let me tell you something. Brandon was a leftist. Brandon was a liberal. He was a Democrat. Okay? He creates the Walk Away campaign, and he's actually got Trump supporters marching through the streets in Los Angeles and other places, Beverly Hills. That's the organizing power the right doesn't have and needs. Where's the website that says defend Donald Trump in the event fraudulent votes try to strip him of his presidency, of his win? It's not there. Here's what they say. First of all, they have a ton of events planned. Look at this. I hope you're ready for widespread mass unrest. Interested in hosting, blah, blah, blah. They say throughout American history, when a president has lost re-election, he's always stepped down willingly, accepting the will of the people and allowing a peaceful transition of power is a hallmark of American democracy. But today, Trump routinely ignores democratic norms and continues to chip away at democratic institutions. I could say the same thing about Democrats, who for years refused to accept that Trump won in 2016. They still don't. This is evidence. Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, has warned Congress that given my experience working for Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, there will never be a peaceful transition of power. Most recently, Trump even threatened to deploy the U.S. military against the American people to quash peaceful protests. There is no line he won't cross. This whole thing is being framed as though only Trump can do wrong. And that's the real challenge for anyone doing legitimate journalism. Clearly, that's not true. Anybody can do wrong, the left and the right. I want legitimate results. I don't care if it's Trump or Biden suing. Let's have the courts rule in. So ultimately, I'll bring it back to this poll. Comment what you think about this. Should Trump just concede because they're planning these mass protests? I don't think he should, but I don't want to see violence. And I'm worried about what happens if the election is all mangled up because of this mail-in voting fiasco. I'll tell you what I think is more likely. I think it's more likely Trump wins on election night. And if he doesn't, well, then he's probably just going to lose, I guess. But I think it's likely that Trump wins on election night. And there was this analytics firm, a Democrat one, that said the same thing. It's called the Red Mirage. That's what they're calling it. Trump wins on election night. Then, a week later when the mail-in votes come in, Trump loses. The only problem, mail-in voting's broken. And Democrats have pivoted now, trying to encourage people to vote in person. Here's my prediction. And I could be wrong, but here's my prediction. Trump wins on election night, and we are close. Trump wins on election night, and then mail-in votes don't quite cut it, and Trump still wins by the end of the week. But Joe Biden, refusing to concede, says it's not fair, these ballots got disqualified, and then starts filing suits. It is more likely, based on what we've seen, that mail-in ballots will be discounted, rejected for a variety of reasons. Joe Biden and the Democrats will then sue, saying that's not fair. 1,000 votes here, 1,000 votes there, and Joe Biden would have won. They will take it to the Supreme Court. Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm just saying that's a likely scenario in my opinion. It's possible the polls are so bad for Trump, he just loses on election night, Joe Biden wins, and then they say, yeah, well, who cares about counting the rest? I think it's funny that they say mail-in ballots are going to always favor Democrats. They're arguing that because Trump told Republicans not to vote by mail and to vote in person, that's why. Maybe it's a good reason. If that's the case, then, based on their logic, the Democrats are going to lose millions of votes. They're saying, I think, was it 50 million votes by mail for Joe Biden are likely to come in? Think about what that means for every Democrat in every jurisdiction. If they lose 2 to 3% due to the margin of error being higher for mail-in ballots. I think it's going to be higher than 2 to 3%. I'll tell you why. In 2012, the New York Times did a story that said, as absentee ballot rises, errors and discounted votes, rise as well. It makes sense. People who don't know how to fill these things out, screw them up, and then their vote isn't counted. Now imagine you've got 50 million people, most of whom have never voted by mail, screwing everything up. We've already seen in California microwaving ballots, ironing, or disinfecting and smearing it all and just making it garbage. What happens when you scale that up to 65 million people plus? We're probably going to have more than that. I think they're estimating like 75 million Democrats, maybe. What happens when out of that 75 million, you have a traditional margin of error for 2 to 3% based on the New York Times on absentee ballots, but absentee is requested. What happens when you give random people universal votes? And it's not in every state, but in some key states. You're probably going to see a failure rate much higher, maybe 5%. I don't know what the hard number will be. But I'm willing to bet the red mirage happens. Then when the mail-in ballots are coming in, Joe Biden doesn't cut it. And many of these mail-in ballots are then challenged by Biden himself. It is possible, however, the inverse happens. They've been trying to pass laws to make it easier to vote by mail. So it's possible that Trump wins, the mail-in ballots come in for Biden, and then Trump sues because these mail-in ballots should have been disqualified and they can't be properly vetted. In which case, he will probably win in the Supreme Court. And then you end up with a president who isn't legitimate, so saith the left. Maybe that's the real goal. I honestly don't know. But I do think I am leaning towards, I think Joe Biden is going to be the one contesting. I guess it's kind of stupid to make a prediction right now. We're about 2 weeks out. So I suppose just get your beers ready, get your popcorn, and sit back. It's going to be a wild ride. But I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of violence. As you can see from these protests being planned. I understand they're saying peaceful protests, and I can understand that. But come on, man. You set up these large, widespread national protests. There's going to be riots. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.